Welcome everybody, this is brothermutant here. Today we have a slightly different build and a slightly different take on how to do my videos. I do have to apologize first. Part of the apology is because of a mistake that I've been making and hadn't realized actually all this time. I am playing on City of Heroes, City of Villains, a Homecoming server. Homecoming server actually has a policy which I was not made aware of. I was given the information, I didn't read it, it's part of the EULA agreement, which of course nobody reads. But the point is you're not allowed to post videos of the content. They have illegally obtained this game. They're in talks supposedly with NC Soft, and as a result of that, they're not allowed to literally promote them, and of course no one's allowed to make money off it, because again, it's part of the reasons that NC Soft gets pissed. Now, I don't make any money off these videos, but YouTube technically could, and as a result, I will actually be taking down all my old videos. Bummer on that part. I'm not deleting them. I'm actually putting them under a private designation, so it'll still be up on YouTube, but no one else can see them but me or obviously YouTube. And as a result, as soon as hopefully NC Soft and the current, so to speak, owners of this game come to an agreement, then I'll re-upload them. Basically, just switch them back to public access. But from this point forward, then that means I can't use in-game footage. What I can do is show you Mids Reborn, which is what you're seeing right here, and how I actually plan out my builds. I can talk about the powers. Sadly, you don't get to see them. I can give you a general feel for what this build will have to offer, which is, again, how I'll be doing things from this point forward. If we're talking about things like the different accolades, again, I like those videos because, again, it gave people access to an audio so that they could go through and say, while they're playing the game, say, oh, yeah, I need to go over there and do this thing, and just listen to me in the background telling them where to go, what badges that they needed, what monsters to defeat. Sadly, you can't do that again because, again, I would need to be in-game. But what I can do is I can actually upload pictures of from like vignette maps of each zone, showing you where the badges are located, where I'll just like circle it with my cursor or do like Microsoft Paint or whatever, and highlight all the ones that you would need to get in each different zone, and as well as highlight areas where I know, for example, like say you need to defeat 100 fake nemesis for a specific badge, for a specific accolade. I can again show you a rough area, say in Peregrine Island, where you could hunt those guys down. Put a team together of like 3 or 4 guys and say, oh, this is where we're going to go. Just follow this circuit here, and you and your team of 3 or 4 people can take those guys out once you're like level 45 to 50. Pretty easy. And knock out 100 in an hour or 2 of gameplay. So stuff like that I can show you, because again, it's a static picture, has nothing to do with Homecoming server per se. It has everything to do with City of Heroes and City of Villains, but again, it's from vignette maps, not the actual game itself, the one that's being pirated, technically speaking, right now. So that is my apology. Again, my fault. Please do not ban my characters. That's why I'm taking down those other videos, because again, if they find out about it, they can straight up ban you. They literally can just delete all your characters and say you don't exist anymore. Now, having said this, there is a way around it as well. I could either A, make another account, which seems stupid. B, I could also make another account on a different server. So the Homecoming server is not the only one. There's actually a Sea of Heroes Rebirth, I want to say. And then there's another one besides that. And literally many of these do not have this policy. And the reason they don't have this policy is because while they're would of course not object, I'm sure, to being legitimate, as they're pirated as well, they are in specific countries, I assume, that don't give no F's about NC Soft or their rules or policies. And as such, they're just like, you know what, we're just going to do our thing, and you can't stop us, and lawyers aren't going to tell us to stop, because we're not going to listen to those lawyers. And can't say as I blame them, honestly. NC Soft isn't using this game. They haven't used it for years. I mean, like, the closest I think they've used anything remotely related to City of Heroes is when they, in a pathetic attempt, put Statesman, who's a character they killed off in this game, in one of their MOBAs. Literally just like the weirdest, like, oh, people will remember him. Yeah, we remember him, and we remember how much we hated that we lost him, you jackasses. So it's a very odd situation. Again, I'm trying my best to be compliant. I was never actually officially told anything, so don't get all like, NC Soft is banning you. No, they're not. They could, and it's certainly the people that are running Homecoming could as well. That's why I'm deleting my content, so to speak, so that I am compliant, that I'm not breaking any rules. So Again, my fault. I should have read the EULA. I think actually someone told me like a long time ago, and I actually thought he was actually kidding. And then I saw someone else that does these videos, Positive Gamer, does a very good job. He's actually on a different server now because of this, but he does a good job, and he actually had to hop off of Homecoming because he was putting up a lot of content and realized he was getting in trouble for it. And he's like, screw this, I'll just go to another one of these servers that doesn't have this issue. So I highly recommend that you look into that if that's something that you want to do as well. But let's get into our video. That's enough rambling on my part. So we have Magus Dorraj. This is another blaster build. This was another thematic build. So again, fits for my sensibilities. That doesn't mean it's the perfect build. It's not optimized for certain things like other people would be like all about the damage. This character is not. This character is about survival. And again, feeling like I could roleplay this character. This is a character that I made specifically because of my love for things like the Magus class from Pathfinder, a game that I've been playing, as anyone knows that watches my other content. Pathfinder Kingmaker is amazing. Magus is a subclass, well not subclass, it is a class that has a little bit of fighting, a little bit of wizardry, and that's about it. They got some unique tricks all on their own, but they're basically a wizard who fights or a fighter who wizards, however you want to look at it. It is a subcaster in that literally they can't cast level 9 spells, or 7 or 8 for that matter, but they can cast levels 0 all the way through 6. I mean, it's cantrips, I should say, all the way through level 6. And again, they can fight, but they're not as good as a fighter. They can wizard, but they're not as good as a wizard. So again, it's kind of a gish. And it's a fun character because, again, you have spells, you have armor, and literally the fact that they can like cast spells in full plate mail without penalty if you get a high enough level is pretty damn baller. So the role-playing idea here was to make a character. I figured, he is still squishy, so I figured Blaster made the most sense for what I was shooting for anyway. And it had spell-like abilities, our powers, as well as martial prowess, hence our ninja training. So we have things like Mobilizing Dart, and as well as the ability to whip out a big-ass fucking sword with Sting of the Wasp, the Lotus Drops, and Golden Dragonfly, and some other stuff that we threw in for flavor. Again, still working on the concept of theme. I am a spell casting character, hence magic is included in my origin. And again, you may say, well, some of these powers, like Fireball makes perfect sense. Rain of Fire, you can kind of fit that in thematically for some of the spells that are in, Pathfinder or D&D. Aim, to me, that's more like True Strike. Flares feels like a Firebolt, like a cantrip that would literally just do fire damage at range. And then, of course, you'd be surprised at the fact that I'm not taking things like Fire Blast and Fire Breath. Fire Breath, for example, actually is a Pathfinder spell. It's not called Fire Breath, it's called Dragon's Breath, but it can be fire. So why wouldn't you take that? Because I don't like it. And that's, again, another thing that I will do to myself. So if you do a power set comparison, let's give you an example here. So we're going to grab our Fire Blast, so we can see what powers we have. We do damage per animation. That's your DPS. That's the one you really kind of care about. The other ones are important. How much endurance it costs, for example. Damage per endurance. So, is it a power piggy, or is it really capitalizing on that damage? That's something that people will be interested in. Damage per second. I don't like this one so much because damage per second is based on the recharge time of a power. So the more recharge I have in it, the better this number gets. Still doesn't do it justice. The damage per animation is the way to go. Find the ones that have the best damage per animation and then just get the recharge down on them ASAP so that you can spam that little fucker. Because if I could spam Blaze like every other power, you better believe I'd do it, because this is an amazing power. It's a little lonesome. But that's how we basically determine what powers I really want based on the DPS toon. Notice here I'm going to do a secondary, and I'm going to do the ninja training. So this is my secondary set. And again, this will give me a good feel for, again, what powers I can pick. You'll notice, for example, Smoke Flash and Blinding Power are not are not on our list. Why? They don't do any damage. And it's not to say they're bad powers. By and large, they're actually decent. We have a minus resistance, which you gotta love that. It's AoE, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, solid AoE, screw you to the bad guys. A full placate, which again breaks my taunting ability, so to speak. Blasters have a more than normal ability to gain attention, is the best way of saying that. So because of usually our AoE moves, we really get a lot of hate thrown our way, or aggro. And a placate will basically drop the aggro for a short period of time. Extremely useful. But again, all that really does on a team is it says, don't attack me, hit this other guy. So what they do is they just shoot the guy standing next to you because they're already pissed and they got to shoot something, which again helps me but doesn't help the team. So I'm kind of like, nah. The minus resistance, on the other hand, though, that is pretty solid screw you to the bad guys. Blinding Powder, on the other hand, again, another very useful ability, is a cone, so it's still AoE. Terrible range, but again, we're reasonably within range anyways of melee attacks because of the three melee powers that I have. But the power itself has a sleep effect, a confuse effect, which is a chance of confuse, and a to hit penalty, minus perception. So literally, like you would expect, literally blinds the target, and again, with the minus perception, minus to hit, goes a long way for allowing you to sneak past bad guys. And as you can see, actually, I have a couple sneak abilities of my own in this build. So again, could have synergistically meshed very well with this build if it weren't for the fact that I needed so many other things. Again, sacrifices had to be made. Notice Fire Blast is over here, and while the damage, if you look at just the base damage, you see the damage of Fire Blast is better than Flare's, not surprising. But the damage per animation, because it's so slow, Flare's is actually better. So this is, again, the reason why I take it over Fire Blast. Fire Blast looks nice because, again, it hits hard, and you people are like, whoa, that one's going to hit for big, big numbers. Yes, but because it's so slow, that big-ass wind-up of it is what kills the DPS. That's your go-to metric, in my opinion. I mean, having said that, if you like the look of it or you just like seeing the big number, hey, man, do that thing. But it's kind of silly. If you're looking for DPS, and let's face it, you're a blaster, what else would you be looking for? Then really you want to go with the damage per animation. Literally, it's the go-to metric. Flares is better, we'll go with Flares. And again, Flares is fast. Not only is it fast casting, it's fast recharge. Jesus Christ, look at this. I got it recharging so well that it's up almost as fast as it's down. That sounds weird, but like literally, if I had Flares and Flares again, I could literally spam these two powers and be boom, 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 and without missing a beat. It's cheap, it's decent damage, really good accuracy. Part of that, of course, is our buffs, so you have to kind of shut that shit off. But by and large, the point's still the same. I do good damage with this one move. This is an amazing move. It just doesn't have the DPS that I really, really, really want out of it. I mean, the numbers here look nice. Double that number to get a decent idea of what you're going to buff it to just by enhancing it. Again, if you look over here, you see my damage buff is 127, which again, 100% more than this. Obviously, 127% more than this. But the point's still the same. It's sitting at a solid 63. Let's just jump it up to twice as much, so it's 126 and then some, probably in the 130s to 150s, maybe somewhere in there. Decent power for what it does and for the endurance cost and the speed of it. So it's really, really nice. The downside is, like I said, compared to something like Blaze or Blazing Bolt, which again doesn't look as impressive. I mean, you're looking at this 63 and look at this 67 and go, really? They're basically the same. This thing's going to be a power piggy. Yes, but this is the sniper ability. Sniper abilities are inherently slow, and as such, the numbers look crappy. When you buff it in combat, and you can fire it off almost instantly, suddenly this number becomes amazeballs. So don't look at that number. That's a misleading, in my opinion. So again, didn't take Fire Blast. Also didn't take Fire Breath. And again, you can kind of see why. It is literally the worst DPS of all the blues that you're seeing here. Even Fire Blast is out competing. Now, yes, this is AoE. So you could just as easily say, well, you're going to get multiple guys with it, ideally. I mean, why would you want to hit just one dude with this 110 damage? And it's solid fire damage. The arc is not that good. The range is not that good. It's got an accuracy buff, so I appreciate that. But by and large, it's not really that impressive to me. I'd rather have Rain of Fire. As you can see, we have picked Rain of Fire and capitalized on it. Hell, Rain of Fire is sitting there at 61. It's almost as good as Flares, and this is AoE. So again, you can see how Rain of Fire could be awesome. The downside, again, with Rain of Fire is because Rain of Fire is doing damage over time, it's also going to have this god-awful panic effect because they're going to be inside of it. They're going to want to leave it. So they're literally going to be like, oh, hands in the air, flailing like little girls, just running around crazy-ass bastards at the hour and trying to get out of the Rain of Fire. No, they will still attack you by and large, but this will give you a little bit of a breather and your team as well. Again, another reason I like it. The fact that it slows them down is useful as well. The KB is simply because I've slotted it that way. As you can see here, chance for knockdown. And again, Ragnarok is amazing for this because of this chance of knockdown. It goes a long way of knocking them on their ass. And again, keeping them in the patch so that that full amount of damage can take place. So again, that's why I say this number is misleading, because if they get out of the area of effect, well, you're not going to do that full 61.64 per second, are you? So you can see the problem here. Again, if someone locks them down, again, a teammate, for example, that has immobilized, where they're locked in place, and then you just rain of fire their ass and just watch those pretty numbers streaming off their heads. It's a very nice power. I can't imagine passing on it. But again, you could take these and you could take these and find a use for them. I'm not saying that they're not useful. I'm just saying for what I was shooting for with everything else that I wanted to grab, I can't grab everything from both lists and justify it. Let's go into what we did pick. So here's flares. I'm not going to look at these numbers here. I'm just clicking on it, so I lock it in place so that I can do stuff like check it to see if it's doing something special. I have no idea why it's giving me a minus resistance, because it doesn't do that. Do I have a minus resistance proc? No. So that's a mistake. Again, I should point out that Mids Reborn isn't perfect. There are mistakes in here. Notice this confusion stuff here, though this is real. This is coming from this, the plus status. This is a specific archetype specific IO set. There's 2 per archetype. In this case, Blaster. Here's one. The other one is being used way over here. Superior Blaster's Wrath. This one here, the proc on it is every time you hit with this power, there's a chance of it proccing the ability to give you Mez Protection. It's only -1. So again, if you think about your Mez Protection, a hold is typically a 3. A stun or an immobilize is typically a 3. Sometimes it's a 4, sometimes there's 2s, but by and large it's usually 3. So -1 isn't crap. But if it stacks on itself, and it does, you can get it up to a 2, a 3, a 4. This could protect you from those effects. Not significantly and not reliably, so that's really our problem here. But remember, as a blaster, one of the things that we get besides our Defiance, which is the ability to buff our damage, which is why you see this 6.6, that's a damage buff. Every time I hit with this power, for a certain amount of time, I get a damage buff. Same with Mobilizing Dart. Again, different type of Defiance, or different amount of Defiance, and a different duration as well. Sting of the Wasp, again, you'll see the same thing. So again, the more you hit with your powers, the more damage you produce. It's kind of like Fury, but not really. There's no bar associated with it, and that's kind of the problem, in my opinion, with this. It used to be back in the day, for blasters, for those of you that played the game live and remember way back then, that the lower your health, the more damage you did. And there became some spontaneously amazing tricks that blasters would do, where they would go out of their way to get hurt, but not die. Take themselves down into the 20 to 40% health range, so they have maximum damage, which again was pretty goddamn funny. They decided that that was broken, and they fixed that quickly. But now we have this Defiance, this stacking damage buff for short amount of time. So when you attack with your powers and you're keeping a track on all your buffs, you'll see a small halo of this power, like it's kind of like a grayed out version up over here under your buffs. And you'll, of course, depending on where you have your nameplate and your health and endurance bars, but basically underneath it, you always see your buffs. You'll see things like flares, Sting of the Wasp. You'll see an icon for each of the ones that you have. That's the Defiance. That's showing you that it's there. You have this buff. When it wears off, then obviously it fell off, and then you'll reapply it or add a different kind. And again, they are different. Notice the AoE ones are rarely very good as far as how much Defiance they give you, but I do believe that these are numbers based on per guy you hit. So while Fireball may not look good at 2%, hit 10 guys with that shit. Now it's up to 20% buff. You see what I'm saying? So if that's true, I'm fairly certain that is. If that's true, then again, your AoE moves do help a lot for adding some damage. It's one of the reasons that blasters have that really nice, 500% maximum damage buff cap. That just is a quick reminder for those of you that don't know. You can also Google this online. That's how I find out this information myself. And you can, of course, test it like I have done in-game as well. It's actually 400% in-game, but the 500%, when they quote that, they're referring to the fact that the power itself does a base 100% damage, as all powers do. So 100% plus the extra 400% you can maximize your buffage to. There's ways around it to make it even better, but by and large, 500% total is about what you'd expect. So if this power, just to give you some frame of reference, this power base is 63.94. Let's just say it's 64. If you can multiply that by a factor of 5, that's the best a blaster could do on this particular power. That's pretty solid. Now we're talking 300 points of goddamn damage and then some on a hit. That's not bad. Same with things like Fireball. When you look at this number, where the hell are you at? 133. Multiply that by, again, 5. And that would be realistically what kind of damage it's doing. While those are good, not great, think about ones like Blaze. This little bastard on its own, 267 in base, times that by 5. That shit looks fucking sexy as hell. So that's why you see people pushing buffs like Musculature or let's see, do Assault Core, for example, for the plus damage, the stacks of damage increase. I got a 75% buff of damage. And again, you will see these numbers realistically portrayed. Downside is I don't think that these actually work. Oh, they actually are looking like they do something. You're seeing the 751 drops down to 715, but that's not as much of a drop as I thought it would be. So chances are what this is counting is the 10% damage buff that we get. If you view totals, miscellaneous buff, you see that we have this damage here, shut off the assault. You see it drop down 10%. That's because this always gives you a 10% damage buff just for having it slotted. You don't even have to turn it on. When you turn it on, it not only is the 10%, it's the 75% maximum stack. All your damaging powers are really high chance to increase your damage, which is, again, extremely similar to what we're seeing with every hit of every power. It's kind of like Defiance and then some. So again, they all add, though, to that maximum 400% maximum buff that a blaster can have. So 75% plus things like aim, which gives a 62.5%, plus any innate damage buffs that you may have. Let me look at my totals again, which can come from things like the way we slotted our powers. This is a very lame 13% damage buff that I have on this build. Very, very poor. The downside is people rely on aim. Nothing wrong with that. People rely on build-up. You'll know we do not have the build-up. What do we have? We have Shinobi. And Shinobi's tricky. I'm going to shift it to the other. So if you hold shift and right-click your mouse over a power like this, you can cycle between this set and the set below it. It's like the back side of it. So you can test out builds. Like you say, oh, well, what would it be like if I did like all these? Just to randomly pick something. You can say, oh, this would be a nice set. What does this do for my toon? Oh, that's not bad. Then you hold shift down and then right click it and shift to the other side and then see how the numbers change. This is a typical way that people will test out a build and say, yeah, I like this buff and it's cheaper this way and I get better recharge this way, but this one's definitely giving me the buffs that I want or whatever. So that's all that is. I'm just going to delete these because, again, I was just clowning around there. But I do this one because I want to show you that the power itself, Shinobi, gives me a damage buff, right? Remember, if I shut it off, I drop down to low numbers. When I kick it on, suddenly it's very decent. And you're like, well, that's pretty good, Brother Mutant. Yeah, but now look at the power itself and you'll see why it's not good. The power gives you a defense buff for everything, which is amazing. It actually, in the game, is giving you a wrong tooltip. Even here it says it's the wrong tooltip. See how it says you run faster and you jump higher? This is the same exact tooltip that it says in the game. That's wrong. And the defense, melee, range, and AoE, while that's technically true, it's actually all defense, as you can see here in this pop-up. Smashing, lethal energy, everything. Even Psi gets a buff. So again, for defense, this is not the worst power to have. It is a toggle. You will turn it on, you will leave it on, and it's awesome. Notice that you have a damage buff and it's a hit buff. Now the problem with this is if you look at it here, you see this 15 and 5, and then it doesn't have the same over here. But if you see this 15 and 5, and if you look in the power in-game, it does the same with damage. There's two different numbers that add up to the 43.75. In this case, they add up to 20. The two numbers, what they mean is this. While you're stealth, because this power will stealth you, which is why you see stealth here. While you're stealthed, you will get a really nice to hit bonus and a really nice damage bonus. So, again, your ability to hit from stealth is amazing. The downside is the moment you attack, boom, you're out of stealth, the number goes down. So the 15 and the 5, you lose the 15, you get the 5. So you went from 20% to hit bonus down to 5%. Same with your damage. You have a solid damage bonus, and then you suddenly have a lot less. So that's why I say it's nice that this power looks like it's giving me like ridiculous numbers of damage buff. Because again, if you see the 188, I shut it off, you see it drops down significantly. Part of it, though, is again, if you're stealth, you don't get nowhere near that damage buff that you were expecting. And that's really the kind of problem here. So you have to know what the powers do to understand what's going on. Having said all this stuff, let's talk quickly, before we talk about the powers individually, let's talk quickly about why did I pick the powers that I picked for this type of thematic build. So, I can justify things like Flare and Fireball, and they make perfect sense. Aim, I again already have my justification in something like True Strike or Aid or any other number of spells that a wizard, or in my case a Magus, would have access to that would buff your ability to do damage and or to hit a target. That's all this really is. So I think of them as spells, technically speaking. Blaze and Blazing Bolt. Now this one and Inferno, these are a little harder to thematically explain off because there really aren't spells that really kind of make sense like this. Or are there? So let's think about this. If I can fit it in my little head canon, that's all I need to enjoy a build. So think about flares, the first one. Single target, decent damage, and again I equate this to something like Firebolt, a simple cantrip that does solid damage at range where you just burn something, okay? I could just as easily say Scorching Ray or something else that makes sense for Blaze or Blazing Bolt. But the range on these are ridiculously high, the damage are ridiculously high, and again, how would you justify things like this? Well, in the game Pathfinder, Kingmaker, or in D&D for that matter, many wizards and or sorcerers, or in our case Magus, have access to these things called Metamagics. Metamagics are the way for them to upgrade their spells. So they literally do more damage. You know, they're either empowered or maximized. They are ones that intensify them. So there's ones that increase the range. There's ones that increase the duration. And again, you get the general feel. So if I can do that in a game like D&D or Pathfinder, certainly you can see that Flares is the base power, and Blaze and or Blazing Bolt are just upgraded versions of various ways of metamagicking those same powers. Those same spells. So again, that's my head canon for stuff like this. Now Inferno, that's a little different. I can't think of a D&D spell or a Pathfinder spell that a Magus has access to that's just an AoE nuke like this. I'm sure there's something similar, but there's not anything that sticks out. So it's one of those where I just want it, so shut up and let me take it. but it's too hard to pass up a power as good as Inferno. Again, it's an amazing screw you to the bad guys. So again, solid choice in my opinion. Now, let's talk about these other ones, and how do they fit thematically into my Magus build. Immobilizing Dart. Now, first, let's talk about the fact that, well, it says it does fire damage. It's actually a lie. Notice that's coming from this guy? I don't think so. I think that's actually coming from if you had a specific power called like Fiery Embrace. It's a power in the game that I did not take, but for whatever reason Mids Reborn keeps telling you that, oh, if you had that ability, you could do extra fire damage with all your attacks. Yes, but I don't have that ability, so stop putting it in here. So I think that's what that is. It's entirely possible it's coming from Reactive. Let's see. Oh, there it is. It's coming from Reactive. Reactive has a chance to do damage. In my case, minus resistance. Oh, that's why the minus resistance. Oh, okay, now it's all falling together. Minus resistance and damage over time, fire, tick, tick, tick. So if I shut that off, you're actually seeing the regular numbers. Okay, we're back to being normal again. Yay, okay. So, I'm learning new stuff every day too, guys. Sorry. But let's actually shut all these off so I don't have to think, well, except for musculature. Because I would have that on all the time. Let's go back to what we're talking about. A mobilizing dart. This power not only mobilizes the target, single target, it has our defiance, our damage buff, and it has a minus recharge and a slow effect on the target when you hit him. Useful. Notice I didn't heavily slot it. I have nucleus exposures, 50 plus 2, 50 plus 2 for accuracy damage. That's it. And again, you can see I'm in Ed. I'm in the green. Green/yellow is usually your goal. You know, reds are sweet because that means you're wasting some, but you're also still doing maximum accuracy or maximum damage. So this is still pretty darn close. And I got a little mobilization buff too. That's also coming from our musculature down here. So again, the fact that we're actually doing good for damage, that doing good for accuracy, and the extra mobilize is not the worst thing ever. It's reasonably fast to cast-ish. 1.5 seconds is not that bad. Obviously, one would be better, but it's okay. Damage is going to be lackluster. And even that, having said that, we're talking the DPS. It's going to be lackluster. But it is there, and it's reasonably cheap. And again, as a blaster, you can cast these first two powers and this first power here, even if you've been mezzed. So in my case, I don't have Fire Blast, so all I have is Flares and Immobilizing Dart. So I can shoot him with this, and then shoot him with that, then shoot him with this, and shoot him with that. And that's about all I have that I can do when I've been mezzed, other than pop a Wakey, or in my case, hit Rune of Protection. More on that later. This 1-2 hit, while this is decent, this is garbage. Even if I buff this, remember, I'm still looking at a green right now. The damage at 104%. Again, it can get better. 125 is pretty damn high, I'd say. But it's not going to be much higher. And the DPS is still shit. The good news is it's toxic damage. The bad news is it's tick, tick, tick damage. It's not even front-loaded with decent toxic damage and then ticking for less damage after that. No, it's literally lame damage, tick, tick, tick multiple times. The immobilize is useful, and that's really the only reason you give a shit about this. And again, how you say, how do you justify this as a spell that a Magus has? I don't. But in my headcanon, I can justify this as Magus has martial training, as all Magus do. As such, there is things called hand crossbows. So why can't they have a little hand crossbow that they just have poison darted up and literally shoot targets with it, doing the toxic damage that it does? Again, perfectly fine with me. If you don't like that as an argument, you could just either say acid splash or acid arrow or something similar. Now, they don't immobilize, but again, you get the general gist of what we're talking about here. If you can justify it to yourself, that's all you really need to, again, roleplay this stuff. Sting of the Wasp, Lotus Drops, and Golden Dragonfly are the ones where I pull out a big-ass sword, which you can custom pick from a whole laundry list of different swords. And I got a really good-looking one that looks like a pimp-ass bastard sword. And I literally whip it out of nowhere, which means I've magically summoned it to my hand, and then I just chop the shit out of the bad guys with it. And they do solid damage. And again, we'll show you when we do another power set comparison to show you the damage base that these three moves do. Another reason I grabbed them. Solid damage. They're all lethal damage, of course. But again, they hit, and they will hit hard. They have an inherent accuracy buff that's 78.75 versus 75%. Because it's an actual weapon, not a power. It is a power, but an actual weapon power. Same if you had like a rifle, or if you had like arrows, like a bow and arrow build. They literally inherently have an accuracy buff because they're weapons. Like 9 times out of 10, anything that is a definite weapon doesn't have the base accuracy at 75. They're almost always higher. And again, it's not leaps and bounds better, but it is better, and you will appreciate, especially early levels. So, decent, and again, thematically fits perfectly for a Magus. Someone should be wielding a weapon of some kind. In my case, a sword. And I'm cool with it. It's the reason I went ninja training. I could have gone martial training as a possibility. There's another set here literally called martial combat. That could have made sense. And again, I could have taken tactical arrow and been the Magus that shoots at distance. And again, I could have grabbed the bow. And again, that's a pretty good build because there's a ranged Magus in the Pathfinder Kingmaker called an Eldritch Archer. And I could have totally made an Eldritch Archer build. Probably should, matter of fact. And it would have been baller. But I wanted this one. And I mean, fireballs are iconic, and what the hell, I wanted some fire damage for a change. So that's the reason I went this way. But Sting of the Wasp, Lotus Drops, and Golden Dragonfly are pretty pimp. Sting of the Wasp, minus defense, Lotus Drops, and a single target. Lotus Drops is a PBA move, so it's centered on you. Not the best radius ever, but if you get mobbed by guys, which you can see that I'll be able to handle, then I have the ability to just AoE the shit out of them. DPS is piss. But if you multiply that by 3, 4, or 5 guys that you hit, you can see that this number suddenly becomes impressive. And again, the minus defense, another appealing aspect of it. And then, of course, Golden Dragonfly is a cone. Talk about some fun. Terrible arc, but you can hit 1, 2, 3 guys in a goddamn row in that if they've lined up in a nice, orderly fashion, where you hit the main guy up front and hit his 2 buddies that are just directly behind him. And it does solid damage to 1 guy, let alone 2 or 3. So you'll appreciate it. The knockdown chance is nice. Not something that you can really rely on, but 60% is a pretty good chance that you're going to knock somebody on their butt. And then again, the minus defense, which are staples for these sword attacks. Softening them up for you and your team. Subsequent hits, which again, you can appreciate. Now, let's talk about weird things like Choking Powder, Shinobi, and Kuji Into. I'm sure I'm saying that wrong. But let's do with Choking Powder first. How do you justify this brother mutant as a Magus? Look at what the power does. Full hold, paralysis, damage over time, toxic damage. And again, nicely done in that the toxic damage is pretty hefty. Even though it's tick, 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 it's a solid amount of tick, 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 as you'll see. It's a decent DPS attack. And again, a little bit of an accuracy buff besides. Solid hit, kind of a power piggy. It's single target, and again, it's fast casting, which again is another appealing aspect to its DPS. But how do you justify it? There's no spell that does this. Well, there's hold monster, hold person spells of this nature, and that's a paralysis spell. That's basically what we're talking about. But they don't do toxic damage, brother mutant. Okay, true. But there's other spells that are out there that do, say, ice damage that paralyze target. I'm thinking Icy Prison. And again, it's damage over time, still a paralysis spell. So again, maybe I've just modified my spell in a way where it's toxic damage versus ice damage. And again, I can still fit that into the theme of the character and not feel like I'm doing something weird. Now you do this grand gesture of chucking out a big cloud of pink or purple or whatever color-coded choking powder you decide to make it. And it kind of feels like you're throwing magic pixie dust at the target. So again, another thing that I could just as easily have said, it's not even a spell, it's just magical stuff that I've found and, you know, like alchemy-wise, have crafted. It's kind of like your tanglefoot bags and things of this nature that just does damage over time and paralyzes the target. Why not? Again, I'm a Magus. There's all kinds of stuff that my character's going to be able to do. So that's not that big of a stretch. Shinobi, this is our toggle we talked about. This is our stealth slash defense slash to hit bonus and damage bonus. And that's basically it. Be real clear on this one. Again, it says it gives you running speed, says it gives you jump height. It doesn't do either of those things. But what it does do is give you that stealth. Again, not a bunch. 35 is decent. But remember, it stacks with the stealth that you're seeing here, this 30-foot one. And you can prove this to yourself in-game by measuring your stealth. You go to your combat attributes on your powers tray. You go to combat attributes, and you monitor base, and its stealth will be in there. The radius is what you're looking for. And again, if you have your sprint on with the celerity proc in there, you know, so it has to be on like this, running, you have to see the toggle spinning, and they have this power on. You will see the 35 and the 30 under your stealth, letting you know that they stack up to 65. I can literally run through missions on most missions. Some guys have extra perception, the ones with like drones out, but by and large, most guys I can dance on their fucking head without attacking them with Shinobi on and sprint on with this character. And that is amazing. The downside of that would be if I had picked a power like Recall Ally. It'd been even better, because there's plenty of opportunity in the game to stealth a mission. Anyone that's played the game long enough knows what that means. You stealth a mission, the objectives is in like the top floor. So you go through level 1, 2, and 3 to get to that third floor computer console or the last bad guy to shoot in the face. Why fight through everything when you don't have to? Especially if people are in a hurry and you just want to finish this task force, for example. Well, I have stealth and double stealth with sprint, with the celerity proc and that Shinobi running. I can say, hey, I can stealth at the end. You guys want me to? Yeah. Well, if I can't kill the guy myself, and I might be able to, but I might not. It could be like a whole fucking room to deal with, or like an AV. And I'm not down with him by myself, at least not safely. So I want to get my team there. If I had picked a power like Recall Ally, where I could teleport one at a time my team to my side, this would be a stealth build for that. It literally stealth to the end, teleport everyone to your side. Now here's the bad guy, let's go to it. Everyone rushes out with their swords and their powers and just kills everything. That's a typical way of stealthing a mission. The other way, which I can do, you have to purchase it, I can do is I can pick a power, it's a recyclable power, it's not one of these powers. It's called Assemble the Team, or ATT. And ATT can be purchased from the pay-to-win vendor for like $1 million or $10 million. But once you buy it, you have it for that particular toon forever. It just takes like 20 minutes or 25 minutes to recharge. It's a long fucking recharge. But for that one mission, where all you need to do, again, is stealth to the back, you click ATT, click the ground, and everyone that's in the mission with you that you can clearly see is on your team list. So if anyone's outside, for example, they don't get teleported to you. But if they're in the mission with you somewhere in the map, they will suddenly all be teleported to your side, assuming they accept the teleport. And then that's a better way to get everyone where they need to go. Again, the downside being that that's a massive recharge on that power. But I can still at least do that. Now let's talk about how I can justify a power like this on a wizard type character. Oh, I should point out also gives Psionic Resistance. I keep forgetting that part. No, wait. No, wrong one. Sorry, Shinobi. There we go. Defense buff, to hit buff, damage buff, stealth. The to hit buff and damage buff, especially because we're stealthed, to me feels more like a sneak attack. So again, like a wizard can do with a spell like Sense Vitals. The fact that I literally have extra defenses and have stealth, to me, that's just nothing more than invisibility, or any of those other powers like greater invisibility, or I can't even think of the first level power, or spell. But it's there's plenty of spell-like abilities or spells even for magi as well as wizards and sorcerers that basically give you something akin to invisibility, where you're attacking in combat, they can't see you, and you get a better chance to hit them, hence the to hit buff, and a better damage output because again they're not prepared for the sneak attack coming to their throat or their gut or their ball sack or whatever it is you're stabbing at that particular time. So that's how I justify something like Shinobi. It makes sense to me. Going on, Kenji Into. This one is a little weird. This is an activation, clickable. Got a nice recharge on it, but it has a nice duration on it to the point where even if you don't put any recharge in it, it'll be up before it's down. And it replaces itself. It doesn't stack from what I can tell. So what does it do? A Psionic Resistance. Not bad. Not something we can get heavily. Oops. Damn it. Sorry. Hold on a second. No. I want you to open. Yes, I want to open it. I want to do that one. Thank you. Alright, back to it. Where were you at? We're looking at you. I was saying that the Psionic Resistance is nice because we don't have much Psionic Resistance in most of our builds, and that 9% or whatever that it just got came from 8%. Most of that's coming from literally that one power. So again, this little bastard right here. And again, I've slotted it minorly, but the fact that you can slot these in there, that's money. That's a perfect spot then for you to put something like this proc. A 3% defense buff to everything globally. Hell yes, please. That's a solid upgrade. And notice that I just did a 50 plus 5 and a 50 plus 5 for the healing and for the endurance. Why? Because the power itself also gives you better regen while it's up, and it gives you better recovery while it's up, and some fear mag protection as well. It's a lot of things that it gave you for one little clickable ability. That's pretty badass. It's relatively cheap, so I don't have to have endurance on it. The recharge, like I said, it's up as fast as it's down, so I didn't even need to put recharge in that little bastard. I have it, but that's because I have global recharge on this toon. But still, if I didn't, the 200 seconds versus the 210 second duration, still money. This is one of those blaster upgrade powers where they gave every secondary set the ability to self-heal or regen or recovery or both or absorb damage, and you get the general idea. That's what this one is. So it's your survivability power is what I basically call it. And again, how do you justify this brothermutant for a Magus? Again, the Psionic Protection, the buffs to regen and recovery, the fear protection. You start thinking of things again like aid or heroism for your fear immunity, the regen and recovery. That's not temp hit points, but you could think of it in terms of healing potions, and it almost feels like you're actually chucking a potion down your throat when you do this power because it is a clickable. The activation animation of this when you're standing still just looks like you're like put your arms out and you buffed yourself. Yay! But if you happen to be moving at the time, you do this weird animation where you almost like thrust your arm, you're like almost like crossing one arm in front of your body and going, yeah! And it almost feels like you're chucking a potion down your throat when you're doing it. So again, potions are a thing for Pathfinder and D&D. It's totally justifiable. And a solid power. You definitely want to have this thing. From here, I could have just as easily Smoke Flash and Blinding Powder justified these ones. You may think that's probably not something you could do easily. But Smoke Flash, and we've got plenty of smoke powers or obscuring mist type powers. So things of this nature aren't that unheard of. Blinding Powder, again, for the same general principle there. The sleep effect, sleep spell, everyone understands what those are. And same for like the confusion. That's just like your, just lost the name of it. Is it confusion? It's the name of the spell for Magus, for wizards and Magus. I think that might be it. It's the one that literally allows you to make the bad guy just like randomly, or confused, something like that. Where he will just like randomly attack himself, his friends, or you. Just can't be controlled. Just he does whatever. So it's similar to that. And the fact that it's a chance of, again, that kind of smacks of that same general feel. So I could have justified any of these, quite frankly. So again, I'm fine with that. Before we get into the actual powers themselves and what they do that I picked, pointing out combat jumping, notice I want sorcery set for obvious thematic reasons. Arcane Bolt, Mystic Flight is awesome. 2 powers in one. Not only are you flying like a wizard or Magus could, you also get the ability to translocate or teleport, which again, Dimension Door, anybody? It makes perfect sense. Rune of Protection, again, this is a late pick for me, but this is a massive protection buff, as well as Mez protection, and can be activated when you've been Mez, hence the reason for wanting it. As blasters don't really have Mez protection usually, this is a good way of getting it. Notice I also went and grabbed Clarion for this reason as well. But, let me shut those off. But that's only when I'm level 50 or close enough to 50 that I can access it. Same with Rune of Protection. Only when I'm 49 or level 46, I want to say, do I have access to that. And that's a bummer, but it's still worth having. And again, how do I justify something like this besides the fact that it's in the sorcery set, so it's clearly a sorcerer type power. Rune of Protection I think of as any number of things. It could be like Stone Skin, Mind Blank, or it could be boy, I'm running out of things to think of. It could be like Greater Heroism could have fit in there to justify it. Any number of things, you know, your resist energy spells or your protection from energy spells, any of that fits thematically in this one power. So again, it's kind of a catch-all, but so what? Most wizards or mage I would multi-buff up anyway before going into battle. The fact that it's a one-and-done activation, that doesn't bother me. Same with Arcane Bolt. You could say that this one's kind of like your magic missile, except that it can miss, so there is that. So if that breaks your head cannon, which again it does for me too, I justify this one's missing in the fact that it's not magic missile. Since it has the KB component to it, it's only a chance of, but the fact that it can knock the opponents back, I think of this one as your battering blast spell. So if you follow my Pathfinder Kingmaker build or playthrough, you've known my love of that particular spell for many different tunes, and it literally hits a target and then knocks them back, pushes them away from you. Sometimes. So again, the fact that it's a chance of is sometimes, and that's cool. And again, I thought of that immediately when I saw that, and it almost kind of feels like it too, because it's a big ball of energy hitting him in the face doing solid energy damage. It's not the best DPS ever, and the one thing I will say about mids that I really don't like is when we do our power set comparisons, you notice you have a primary, we can go secondary, hell, we can even go to ancillary, which is your patron pools or your epic pools, the ones that you get at the tier like 35 on up. And again, any of these can be compared, but there's nothing in here that allows you to check power pools. And that, to me, seems like a mistake. Because they don't pop up and they don't give you the same information that you would to, say, find out how much damage or DPS does it use or do, or how much damage per second or damage per end, or does it have another kind of buff that I'm not seeing? Because there's nothing in there that allows you to do that for a power pool, which is a damn shame. But the in-game, it's easy enough to tell, so that's good enough for me. But that move, that Arcane Bolt, it is decent damage if it weren't for the fact that the animation is this massive hoopa-joopa-joopa before you chuck the ball out. That kind of sucks. On other builds, though, not a blaster, but on another build, like say a controller, this is much needed extra damage. It's not going to be the same damage numbers, for one thing, because there's always a damage scale depending on the archetype you pick, but Arcane Bolt for, say, a controller, remember the damage gets doubled, critted, if you will, if the target is held, immobilized, slept, or stunned. So again, that's what you basically do better than anybody, more or less. And as a controller, it's easy to set that up and then hit him with something like Arcane Bolt, which is, again, solid damage and then double that damage. You can see how that would be appealing. Again, Mystic Flight feels right to me. I don't use it all the time, so much like a wizard or a magus, I'm going to zip from place to place and then I'll land. And again, the fact that I can teleport. And while people will be like, oh, this teleport's crap, I don't even want this sorcery set because the flight is, it's not as fast as, say, Afterburner. So fly with Afterburner on is much faster. So getting from place to place is much better for someone that picks the fly, or flight, set. Like this here. So fly, and then of course Afterburner, and go even faster. And again, this is how people usually get from point A to point B. This is still good enough, and the fact that you can translocate or teleport is useful in combat. How? You would never run this because it's such a power pig. I mean, if you lock it in place, it's expensive. Even with me decreasing the endurance on this thing, it's still a power piggy. I would never want to fly if I had to. I suppose I would. If I had a teammate buffing my endurance, for example, then sure. But by and large, I would never fly in combat. But, having said that, I have turned it on so I could teleport in combat when I wasn't stealthy enough to get past some of those guys with that better perception. Remember, I have double stealth. That's still not enough sometimes. So, have sprint on, have shinobi on, fly near the guys that have that extra ability to see your ass, they have the extra perception buff, and then use the translocate ability to teleport far the fuck away from them so that you're outside of their perception range. I have done that successfully in missions solo, where I've stealthed a mission and went, that's pretty cool. So again, I still maintain it's a solid spell pick. So Mystic Flight, to me, still makes the cut. And again, Spirit Warden Flame Inflame does decent damage, and again, the fact that it doesn't tell you what the damage is in here pisses me off, but you can, in the game, find out what that is. It's relatively fast and easy to find out how much DPS it is. It's not amazing, but it's not, again, horrible for, say, a controller, someone that's already weak. But I don't think that you get double damage on Inflame, because it's not an attack so much as it's a, you summon a pet, which is why, again, it says Inflame Pet down here. You summon a pet that basically attaches itself to the bad guy in question, or you could buff a teammate, where they basically just do AoE damage as well. Potato, patata. Point is I don't think you get the double damage from immobilized, stunned, or controlled targets, which is kind of a drag. It is interesting, and I want to say it is fire damage. It's a little weird, and again, you can color code it, so I think that by default the flame is like purple and real stupid looking, and it makes them leave drops of molten purple flame on the ground. So if the bad guy, for example, if you hit the bad guy with it, they start running away. You'll see like little purple motes of fire just sitting on the ground as he's running away. It's kind of funny, but again, it's kind of stupid. Spirit Ward, again, is not one that you would use for yourself. It's one that you use for a teammate or a pet, for that matter. And again, lore pets, that counts, so I can buff my lore pet with it, for example. But I'm not a fan of it. It's just an absorb ability. You literally hit them with a absorb, which is temp HP. And again, thematically, I can fit that in my head canon. Again, we've talked about plenty of spells like Aid, Heroism, Greater Heroism that give temp HP. This is more or less the same thing. So again, still fits. It's just one of those where I'm not a fan. We got our Kick, Tough, and Weave, and again, I justify these with the fact, again, I am a Magus. I am martially trained, so the ability to kick him in the ball sack while still holding my swords makes sense. Being tough and being able to weave out of combat, that makes sense as well, and it gets me my defenses. The ones that are a little harder to explain, Web Envelope, Scorpion Shield, and Summon Spiderling, especially since these are mostly tech-based powers. Web Envelope, again, you summon a magic mace, or in my case, I would say a magic scepter, and I lob a web spell at your ass. So again, not bad. Again, I can thematically play that off. It is just a magically enchanted scepter that I magically summoned in my hand. I lob the web envelope at you, AoE style, and everyone's been webbed up. Scorpion Shield, a little harder to explain this one, especially if you leave the default setting on it, which means that you see the stupid sign of Arachnos pulses on your chest and on your back of your character, so it looks like you got a big ass glowing spider on you, which looks stupid. But you can go to the icon, or the iconic, whatever the hell they call it, the vendor that allows you to change the look of your toon. And you can change the setting on Scorpion Shield to either be minimal graphics, and what that means is you take away that stupid spider icon. You can change the color, of course, of the aura around you, so you can be like a glowing purple, pink, green, whatever color you decide. And again, it kind of feels like you got mage armor or shield spell on. And again, thematically, that fits for me. Summon Spiderlings. Okay, now this one is a reach. Again, much like our Inferno Nova ability, our exploding in a big fucking circle. Same with Summon Spiderlings. You summon these giant-ass metal spiders that have machine guns on their back. How does that fit in your head canon, brother mutant? Well, A, shut up, I want them. B, it's a summon spell. There's nothing to say that I can't summon golems, so they are mechanical golems. There's nothing wrong with that. Now, the machine guns probably are a bit of a stretch, but they have to have some kind of an attack, so whatever. Maybe they're not machine guns. Maybe it's Gatling guns that are shooting crossbow bolts, and it just sounds like machine guns. Shut up, I want them. And that's why I'm going with them. So again, thematically, it makes sense to me. That's all that matters. Before we get into the powers themselves and what they do, briefly, let's talk about the fact that, A, don't forget that we always turn on our accolades on, just the ones that make sense. Freedom Phalanx, Portal Jockey, Task Force Commander, and Atlas Medallion. Those are all for extra HP, HP and Endurance, extra HP and extra Endurance. Total, if you have all four, which of course I always try to do on any toon that I play for any real length of time, to get a good feel if the toon's worth a damn. A lot of people are like, this toon sucks, I'm dying too much. Why? Do you have not enough endurance? Yeah, my toggles keep dropping. Well, do you have your Atlas Medallion and your Portal Jockey? That's 5% extra endurance each. That's 10% extra endurance. Well, that's not going to keep me up very long. Haha, but it does. And here's why. Watch what happens to my recovery when I shut off accolades. See how it went down? 4.63, now it's 5.06. Why? The recovery is based on your maximum endurance. It doesn't mean your endurance is at max, but I'm saying if your endurance is 100 like most people's in the game, then it's based on that. But I can get mine to 110. Hell, I can get it to more than that depending on how I slot my powers. So again, the more endurance you have, the more recovery you have. So if you're having end issues, make sure to get those two accolades at first, just to make sure that you're not doing something stupid. And of course, we have other tricks besides that we employ. But by and large, those two are money. You want Portal Jockey, you want Atlas Medallion. Certainly Atlas Medallion at the very least. And if you start to see an improvement, and of course you will, then you're like, okay, it's getting there. It's getting to be where I want it. Then get Portal Jockey, and then you probably have it mostly sewed up. From there, are you also dying maybe because your HP is too low? Well, then here's Freedom Phalanx. That's another 10% extra HP. Here's another 5. Here's another 5. So that's 20% HP if you grab these other 3 accolades. And again, highly recommend you do so before you scrap a toon and say, this toon sucks. Yeah, but could you have had more HP and, taken an alpha strike maybe? Punch to the face, something sneaks past your defenses and you crumple like a little baby because you had 1,200 maybe hit points where you could have had maybe 1,400. Would it have been different? You see my point. That's why I say don't discount your toons before you actually do this. Other stuff in here, and again, thematically speaking, I want to talk about this. Our Vanguard Medal, Elusive Mind, Gias, I'm sure I'm saying that wrong, of the Kind Ones. I think it's called Gish, whatever. Gish of the Kind Ones, Eye of the Magus. These 4 alone are clickables. Okay, Portable Workbench and the Cray CBX Pistols, a clickable attack power. This is a temporary workbench. You can buy this, by the way. You don't even have to do the accolade anymore for that piece of shit. You can actually just go to the pay-to-win vendor, drop like 10 million bucks, and you have it. And again, thematically speaking, a wizard or a magus, in my opinion, should have the ability to summon a workbench. Cray Pistol, it's a little different. Kind of have to justify having ray guns as a wizard or a magus. But again, I would not take it. But the Eye of the Magus, the Elusive Mind, Gias of the Kind Ones, and the Vanguard Medal, these are all buffs of various kinds. Elusive Minds, for example. Psionic Resistance, Psionic Defense. Again, a perfect example of something like, what is it? Not free your mind. What the hell's that spell called for wizards? Mind Blank. There's a fine example of Mind Blank right here. Click, boom, massive recharge, so you're not going to use it too much. But again, as a once and done power or spell, in my case, it makes perfect sense. Elusive Mind. Vanguard Medal, this one's a little weirder. This is the one that's a general buff for you, the duration of your stun effect. Notice that if I activate Vanguard Medal, you'll notice some things change. Where is it? Something like, say, a Mobilizing Dart. See the duration change here? That's part of what this is doing. It literally increases the duration of your stuns, your sleeps, your holds, your immobilizes, and blah, blah, blah. It does some other stuff too, like your to-hit buffs probably change. So if I was monitoring it down here, 74.7 versus... Wow, it doesn't do it. Really? I guess it really is just all the stuns and holds. All the mes effects. I actually thought it did more than that. My bad. But again, your mobilizes, your sleeps, your holds, your stuns, all that stuff is basically just souped up where it just lasts longer. And you can see the appeal for that. Again, I could justify that as any kind of extend spell metamagic effect. So again, perfectly fine for me. Gias of the Kind Ones, or the hell you pronounce this thing, is a bonus to recovery and accuracy. Again, a solid upgrade. You notice that your recharge gets better. Our recovery gets amazingly better. Holy Jesus. And then other stuff as well. To hit bonus got up there as well. And again, the downside is a massive penalty to your defenses. You see how everything went down 10% when I activate that. So again, a buff that's not a buff. It's a very weird one. But again, you could justify something like that. There's plenty of things that you do that would focus or concentrate your wizardly spells and powers and abilities. So having that and have it still be a penalty while being a massive buff to you besides still makes sense to me. Eye of the Magus. Now this is the one that you're definitely going to feel. Massive buff to resistance and defenses. As you can see, this thing is just amazing. Solid buff for a minute, 60-second buff to all those wonderful, wonderful things. Doesn't give you shit for psi, but remember, that's what your Elusive Mind was about. I mean, look at that. With both of those activated, Eye of the Magus and Elusive Mind for a minute, you're a baller son of a bitch. But then when the minute crashes, you're back to being a weak little kitten. So again, you could see the appeal of those clickables, just to point that out to you. As far as incarnate stuff, one for musculature radial for my typical damage buff. But notice that it also buffs my mobilization. I have at least one of those. And then it also buffs my defense debuffs, and I have 3 of them in the form of Sting of the Wasp, the lowest drops, and Gold and Dragonfly. So those three at the very least benefit from it. Hell, I even think these guys might have, yeah, they have defense debuffs on their machine gun effects. So again, there's bonus there, and I also have another mobilize effect with web envelope, so a bonus there. And then hit debuff. I don't think there's anything in here that's a to hit debuff that I have. I could be mistaken on that. We'll see, but I don't think so. Endurance mod, though, that will help with my stamina, and as well as my Kuji Into, and that's about it. Maybe Rune of Protection. No, just checking, because sometimes it gives you a resistance buff as well. I'm thinking of something else, but again, still helpful and still appreciated. So again, it keeps my endurance and my recovery up. The run speed, I appreciate that. So again, I'm extra zippy. Notice that I have slotted my Swift for Fly so that my Mystic Fight is even a little bit faster, even if it's not that much. I do appreciate it. But by and large, I am a zippy son of a bitch with Musculature Radial on. So even with Sprint off, I'm pretty fast at pedaling forward and backwards in combat. As far as the other stuff here, Ion Radial felt perfect to me. You may say, why not grab Pyronic? Again, it's more damage and it makes sense. Ion's still good. I still like it. You pick a target and it bounces through multiple guys. It feels like, to me, Chain Lightning. Again, another spell that's thematically a Magus or Wizard spell from Pathfinder. So it fits perfectly thematically for me. Vanguard, I went a little weird here for my lore pets. I've got the Vanguard Radial. And I probably shouldn't pick these two. I probably should have grabbed the Knives of Artemis, because they're sword-wielding bitches. I could have used those because, again, thematically speaking, would have been like, I'm summoning my warrior brethren to my side. Here you go, kid. They don't have spells, but they have attacks, caltrops, and all kinds of other fun shit. And they would have been fun to have them on my side. They do good DPS. I picked the Vanguard Radial Superior because if you go up the right side, which is what the Radial Superior is of the tree, you summon a wizard and you summon a sorcerer is what they call them. But they look like they're armored, and the weird space armor is fucking stupid looking. But one's a buffer that's immortal and will help you out, and the other one's basically a damage dealer, which again will help you out. They have spells or powers that feel sorcerer/wizard like, so yeah, it's okay. I just wish they didn't look like they did. Is the only real downside. But that's why I picked those. Clarion, again, a ability to not be mezzed, is a staple for any kind of blaster. One up the left side so that it will last for the full 2 minutes. Now, of course, it wears off over time, which means it's super strong for the first 30 seconds, then it's not so good for the next minute, and then it's not so good for the last 30 seconds of it. But once it wears off, it's back to being able to be clicked again. And this is another one of those, much like Rune of Protection, where if you've been mezzed, you can click that fucker and break out of the mezz effect. So I have two ways to break mezzes. Now, sadly, again, they're not until the end of the build, but a solid upgrade in my opinion. Notice I went reactive, radial, and assault core. This is extra damage. I don't mind that at all, especially for a blaster type. And again, I do apologize on this one. Notice I went core on this one. That's the damage buff instead of the double damage, which, remember, we found out the other day is not double damage. It is double base damage. So if it did 100 points of damage, or in this case 63 base, and you have the assault up on the right side of the tree instead of the left side that does double damage on a hit, chance of double damage I should say, it would be another 63 that you would see pop up over the target, not this 241. That's ridiculous, and that would have been OP, so it makes sense. So it's just another 100% damage buff, and you're like, well, 100% versus what you got here, this is 75%, brother mutant. Why wouldn't you want the 100%? Well, remember, the 100% is only of base, for one, and that's fine, because 75% is also of base, but it's always on the 75% versus the other one, which is chance of. It's like a 60 or 66% chance of doing the double damage, whereas the 75% is reliable. You just attack, and you can stack it up to 5 times. So as long as you don't stop attacking, and why would I, unless it's dead, then I'll always have that 15 times 5, which is why it stacks up to 75%. That will always be on my toon, and while of course the assault core is running. And again, I appreciate that. The reactive one, this one is probably a little harder to justify wizardly like. It is the one that does minus resistance per hit, or chance of 25% chance to minus resist a target per hit, and then chance of fire damage, 75% chance to set them on fire, which I could justify the setting them on fire part. Maybe I'm a type of Magus that is a dragon Elder Scion type, where I'm have like fire dragon blood, like a gold dragon or a red dragon built into me, where I'm doing extra elemental damage per hit kind of thing. And again, it's a little reaching, I'll grant you, but again, I can justify it in my head canon, and that's all that matters. Now let's go into the powers themselves before we finish this video off. Flares, solid power, like I said, very fast. You will feel it. And again, it is a staple. Remember the first 3 powers, these 2 here, and this one there, that you can pick up at level 1 when you've been mezzed. In almost every instance, you can attack with these. The one exception, I think, is like Confuse, maybe Fear. But by and large, if you've been held or slept or stunned, you can still fire any of these 3 off, if you have them, of course. So I only have 2 to pick from. One that's good, one that's kind of, it's there. It's kind of to fill in between this attack. So I'll do this one, then that one, then this one again, and then wait for this one to come back, because it does not recharge as fast. But as a 1-2 combo, it's not the worst thing ever. And the fact that it's toxic damage is nice, and it mobilizes is nice. The downside, again, is the tick, tick, tick instead of the upfront damage. But Flares is okay for its Defiance buff, the fact that acting move of it, the fact that it's reasonably cheap to cast. I can fucking spam that thing and never run out of blue bar. Mobilizing Dart, it's okay. A little accuracy bump, I'll appreciate that. The toxic damage, we appreciate that too, but we didn't really heavily invest in it, and there really wasn't much of a need to. I will say the one thing that you could have done here is there's probably an immobilization proc or 2 that are of merit, where you can do like extra damage with it. If I had like an extra slot, which as you can see I don't, but if I did, I could have done maybe an extra damage with it, and that could have been useful then for a quick acting, reasonably cheap power that's reasonably good for recharge. Remember, procs, stuff that does damage, like your chance of fire damage, are really, really nice, especially on moves that are reasonably decent on the recharge. Not fast, like this one, but like this one here, where it's up a decent amount of time in a combat round, or sorry, in a minute worth of combat. But the Mobilizing Dart, by and large, is kind of meh. Sting of the Wasp, decent minus defense. Notice we're getting a buff, and again, that's coming from our musculature, as well as our lysosome exposure. This is a 50 plus 2 lysosome, reasonably cheap. As a matter of fact, I think I got this already at a 50 plus 2 on this toon. It only costs like $1 million for each of them, and you have to buy 3 to get this to be a plus 2. That's a solid upgrade to accuracy and defense debuff, and to hit debuff if it did that, but it does not. But the defense debuff, it got kicked in from this here. So that's helpful. And the extra accuracy is appreciated, because you see that I've slotted this for kinetic combats at 50 plus, or sorry, 35 plus 5s. It's a low set. But notice what the set gets you at level 4. This is the reason I went this way. Defense buff, or sorry, defense buff for smashing and lethal. There we go, 3.75%. That's why you did this one. Because remember, it's all about the defense in this guy. So what am I going to have for defense? Really good melee range and AoE? Not so much. Mostly is about smashing lethal and energy. Yes, some negative too, but that's only because the energy gets buffed as well. But by and large, I'm weak as a kitten against fire and cold, and psi always a problem for most of my builds. But the melee range and AoE are at least better than these 2 numbers here and this number there. So if it keys off of being melee range or AoE, it will be meh defenses. If it's smashing lethal energy or negative-ish, then I'm actually looking pretty good. Having said that, that's the reason for going Sting of the Wasp with the kinetic combats. That's why these ones are always so pricey, by the way. But the fact that I got these at 35 plus 5 is nice, but the reason for this extra slot here was because you'll notice if you look at the kinetic combats, you notice I didn't take the proc, the kinetic combat knockdown bonus. I don't need it. And I don't need the extra running speed, so I didn't want to do the 5th slot for that. But notice that my accuracy in here would have been pissed, because there's only one recipe in here that's an accuracy one. It's the first one, accuracy damage. See that? 35 plus 5. That's only 28.67 blah 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 % of accuracy extra added to this innate 78%. Now again, because the innate 78%, it's a little bit better than you think, but it's still nowhere near my 1.66 to 2.00 that I shoot for in game. So what do? That little bastard right there. And again, that pushes me up to a very respectable 65.3% extra accuracy bonus on top of the 78.75 that we have here base. That puts me in a good place for hitting with this move. Fireball 5 slot of this bad boy, just like you'd expect it to do. It's AoE damage, nice radius, decent range, and again, you'll appreciate that, especially being a squishy type, to soften up a target before they have a chance to shoot at you. Remember, that's always a staple. Remember, they have the same range as many of your powers, which are 80 feet. So if you're within 80 feet, you shoot them, AoE, the first thing they do is, it's almost like the goddamn Matrix. They They immediately take damage. They immediately all turn to you at the same fucking time, and they immediately pull out their guns in unison and shoot, shoot, shoot your ass. Well, if you're at 92 feet, they can't do that. They get hit, they get pissed, they look at you, and then they pull out their guns, and then they have to walk 12 feet to shoot you. And in that time, hopefully, you've hit one or two more guys that have died, and or your scrapper, your tank, your brute, your whatever, ran in there, or your team, and started killing other shit. Hell, maybe your spiderlings started shooting things and they died. I'm not saying how they died, just that you'll whittle them down before they have a chance to close that 80-foot gap to shoot your ass. That's helpful. Notice that we took a fire damage proc in here, so these numbers are nice. Notice, by the way, on this, I'm going to delete this one just for a second to show it to you. Notice the numbers change down here, right? So you got the smashing damage and the fire damage. It's a little weird that it does smashing damage, I must say. I don't remember that, but it is there. But I wanted to show this to you. Here's our chance of fire. So notice that it's fire's 161 plus 27, blah, 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 right? Notice how the number jumped up here to 176. Again, that's including the extra fire damage from this thing on average. So this DPS number here, this damage that you're seeing here, is realistically what you will see as far as over time, not what you'll see when this procs. Because it's, as you can see, 71.75. That's the extra damage you're seeing up there if you see the pop-up tooltip. So you're not seeing the extra 71 smack down here. It's showing you an average because there's a chance of and how many procs it can give you in a minute or whatever. So that's being factored in there. So that is kind of helpful, I will say that. But it doesn't give you the information you would need for like DPS calculations, in my opinion. But a solid upgrade. And notice that we've slotted this one because it gives us extra range for all our powers. 5%, baby. And we will take that shit. And that includes things like our Mobilizing Dart being able to shoot a little bit farther. Same with our flares being able to shoot a little bit farther. So you can see how we're already way beyond the 80 on many of our spells for range. And that's partially because of this little bastard. And we appreciate that. Extra smashing lethal resistance, which we desperately need. As you can see, we don't have shit all for resistances in this build unless we do Rune of Protection. I was tempted to grab, instead of Clarion, to grab Barrier. That's the one that literally pops out and you give a massive buff to you and your team and your pets, where it's high defenses and high resistances, and then it drastically scales down over time. But again, Clarion was just too nice to not have it. Because again, if you get Mez as a blaster type, you get fucked heavily. And while Rune of Protection helps, it's not up all the time. So having a 1-2 combo like that where I can use one or the other almost always ensures that I'm protected. Having said that, where were we? Fireball, wasn't it? The other thing to talk about for Fireball is the fact that we have not only the smashing lethal resistance, the enhanced accuracy to all my powers. Remember, that's accuracy, not to hit, just accuracy. That's a global 0.07 extra accuracy. So if you look in the game in a power like Flares that has an accuracy of 75, in the game it will say 1x, 1.0x, something like that. And that's 75%, just so we're clear. So this 78.75 is probably 1.05x. It's not amazing, but it's better than 1, and you can see the appeal. When I say that I'm looking for 66% to the 2.0, I'm referring to the fact that I want it to be a 1.66 all the way up to a 2.0x. If I can get within those ranges, I usually consider it a safe hitting and attack power. So that's what we're referring to. So again, it's a little misleading when we talk about mids. If I could show you in the game, I would, but I can't. But point is that 0.07 is coming from here. That's 7% actually. That's literally adding to your 1.00x another 0.07. So a 1.00x, an unmodified power, would be a 1.07 thanks to this one buff. And I have more than one of those. Again, a way to check that is you go view totals and miscellaneous buffs. Not your to hit bonus, your accuracy bonus. I have a global accuracy bonus of 37%, which means if any power I have has a 1.00x, which means I have unslotted it, 1.00x, you could add a 0.37 to it. So 1.00x becomes a 1.37x. And that's never going to happen because I'm never going to have a power that I don't slot. Hell, I even slot kick with at least one accuracy. So again, this would be a 1.53 plus 0.37. That puts me well above, just this one little guy and this buff here, puts me well above my 1.66 bonus that I was shooting for. So a solid hit between brawl, kick, and those are the worst ones I have on my goddamn build. So that's nice, just to point that out to you. Rain of Fire, solid, like it says, damage over time. I have a nice chance for knockdown in there. I could have changed it out for something like the bombardment for, again, the chance of fire damage. We already have that here, and I think those are unique, but I can't remember. They may not be. But I could have put in, say, this one here, the Annihilation, because it has a proc in there. See that minus resistance? It's not as amazing as some of the other minus resistance powers that I've seen, or procs, but it's a solid melting of a target. And its AoE has a really good chance then to proc on everybody. That could have been the way to go here. So if someone wants to change it up, this would be something that I would consider. It gives you extra endurance, energy negative resistance, and regen, and for 5 slotting it like I've done right now, an endurance discount on all your powers, only 3%, but it's appreciated. It wouldn't be the worst choice ever, but I do like the chance of knockdown on this thing here. That's amazing. And this is a purple set. Notice that you can take a purples if you do not attune them. Remember, purples are by default technically attuned. You cannot slot them until you're level 47, but once you do, you'll love it. And these things all scale. That's what attuned means. Purples all scale down. Same with these Blaster Wrath. The archetype specific recipes are attuned by default. Same with the winter set, which I don't think I have a winter set on here, which is a little weird. Probably a reason for that. Winter sets are usually pretty good. Probably didn't like the winter look. It thematically didn't make sense. Anyway, not the point. Those are all attuned is my point. But these ones, because these are purples, they can actually be increased to 50 plus 5s. There's no need to do that for the chance of knockdown, but I got a 50 plus 5 for all these other ones. And notice the one that I'm missing from this set, because again, it's 5 of 6. I'm missing the damage one. Why? I'm not feeling the pinch on that. I'm in the red already. So having the damage one would only add to that damage, sure, but it'd be a minor increase, really. Sure, the number would go up, but it'd be not worth chasing, in my opinion. If you had an extra slot, though, hey, man, do that thing, because, again, the bonus would be pretty sweet. That's Toxic and Psi Resistance, 6%, which we, of course, would appreciate. But it wasn't worth it to me. But this set, again, that chance of knockdown is money. Because, again, AoE, it's a good chance of proccing. And the reason it has a good chance of proccing, for those of you that don't know on this one, because this is not just like Fireball. I could have done it in Fireball. I actually originally had these swapped, where this set here, 5 of them were all up here, and this 5 set was down here, so that my Rain of Fire would do that extra chance of fire damage, which I thought thematically made sense to me. I'm like, yeah, extra fire damage. But then I decided, you know what, I'd really have them rather fall down in the Rain of Fire, because it A, saves my ass, saves my team's ass, and again, keeps them in the fire patch where they're more likely than to take all the damage, right? So there's that. The other reason is the chance of knockdown will approximate with the chance of fire, because Rain of Fire versus Fireball. Fireball hits once and checks for that proc, whereas Rain of Fire is going to continue to rain fire on them, and which means for the duration of the effect, which is a 15-second duration, it's going to routinely check to see, does it hit, does it hit, does it hit, and that applies for the proc as well. So it'll be, no one's getting knocked down, no one's getting knocked down, oh, a bunch of people got knocked down, oh, no one's getting knocked down, oh, someone else got knocked down. So we'll constantly cycle through that over that 15-second time. So that's why those procs are really, really nice here. Well, yes, you could have seen really nice fire damage spiking off of multiple dudes. I did see that. I'd rather switch it like I've done this way. And again, I may be wrong on this, but I'm okay with that as a choice. And by and large, the powers, the bonuses, I should say, that you're seeing from each of these are reasonably the same. So if I switch them around, it's not the end of the world. So 75% accuracy, 74%. Damage of 112, damage of 121. Damage or endurance discount of basically 50, endurance discount of basically 40. So this one's actually a little more cheap, power-wise speaking. And while this one is a power pig, this one's definitely worse. So maybe switching it back, if I'm really feeling the pinch, this would be helpful. But it's not. I'm not really running out of blue at all because of this little power here. And then recharge of 96 versus recharge of 97. Again, basically it's the same buff, damn near, step per step, more or less. Choking powder, you'll notice I went a little weird on this. I put an Apocalypse, another purple set in here, just one, and it's the damage one. This is a beautiful bonus. Watch this. These two bonuses here and here are just accuracy hold, accuracy recharge. No damage at all. They're only level 30s, no less. Well, 30 plus 5s. So again, I have decent accuracy, a little bit of hold, a little bit of recharge. And then I have this one here, only this one here, for a decent amount of damage. Now, watch this shit. 50 plus 5, plus my musculature bonus of damage, for that one recipe, this one IO slot here, and then the musculature besides. Look how much damage I have on this little power. I'm already in the green. That's just from 1 free above. I thought that was pretty slick. So 50 plus 5 damage is the way to go, or something that you can't really slot heavily. That's not bad. Because that's nice. Between that and that, that's putting me in the green zone, and I'm pretty happy with that. And again, it's not a power that I heavily rely on. It does decent damage. The damage over time is toxic, all toxic, which you have to appreciate. Remember, much like your Mobilizing Dart, it doesn't do lethal damage like you think it would. It's all toxic, baby, and I gotta keep forgetting to point that out to you. Same with Choking Powder. Why is that important? Remember, do you have any defenses for toxic? Not a goddamn one here. Is it melee, is it ranged, or is it AoE? Well, in both of these cases, it's ranged, I believe. Because Choking Powder, I don't think, is a cone. Yeah, it's all single target, ranged. Range and range. So if they have terrible range defense, which I do not have, but I have okay, this would be more likely to hit those guys. So again, there's another reason to love those two powers. And the fact that it's all toxic damage, which again is not heavily resisted, it's very similar to Psi. That's not bad. But I have buffed for Choking Powder the hold duration. It's not amazing, but it is better than what it was before. 14.3 is now up to 18.19. So meh is my only real hold. It's kind of sucky, but it does help. Shinobi, notice I have the cytoskeleton exposures, 50 plus 2, 50 plus 2. Remember, that's endurance discount because it is a toggle. And to hit buff, which is not, it does give me a bonus to my to hit, and a defense buff. So I'm getting all 3 of those benefits from those little fuckers, and that's 50 plus 2, 50 plus 2. Because of that, that's more than enough to put me in the green for all 3 categories of what I care about. The only thing that's missing is recharge, because you could have had a recharge in there, which I don't have. So if it ever falls off me, if I shut it off for whatever reason, I have to wait for 2.56 seconds before I can reactivate it. That's not the end of the world. Not for me. If it was like 10 seconds, that'd be different. This is nothing. But this gave me a chance for that extra slot then to put in something like this, the chance for build-up proc from Gaussians. Remember, this one will randomly fire off. It's always on, because I'm always going to run this thing. It's always on, and as such, my hit bonus will get a nice spike of 40% to hit bonus randomly, and then a 100% damage bonus at that same time, randomly produced. So it's just going to be a little icon that shows up under your buffs over here. It'll be a little purple icon over it. It looks very similar to the Hasten icon. That's yellow, but it'll be purple. When that's up, you'll notice that you have a solid chance of hitting a solid damage buff for meager 5 seconds and change. But by and large, it adds to your DPS. Aim, nothing fancy here. This is my rectified reticle set to hit buff recharge at 20 plus 5. This is a very low set, but I do like the increased perception. So when I got a stealthy motherfucker, if I don't have a yellow to pop so I can see that stealthy motherfucker, a fine example is when they use the smoke grenade on your ass and you can't see shit. That increased perception will allow you to see them. So I pop aim, poof, everyone's within vision again. And I can start shooting targets again. Only for 10 seconds, but until that 10 seconds wears off, I can see targets and boom, 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 taking guys out like I should. That's helpful. And if you can't see them, just to point some stuff out, you do not have to have a target for Rain of Fire, except for the ground. You do not have to have a target for Inferno. Again, it centers on you and explodes in a fucking circle. So those 2 things alone are money. And if you haven't summoned your spiderlings, summon them now, because they weren't in the smoke bomb when it went off. The smoke doesn't last. It just hits and then it's off. It puts everyone under that minus perception debuff. But if these weren't out at the time, summon those little fuckers now. I bet you they can see the target and let them do the damage. That's perfectly fine. Just saying, there's ways around you can't see shit. Always try to find a move, and I think, matter of fact, now that I think about it, I actually have a third. The Lotus Drops, this AoE move, you do not have to have a target. Yes, there's an accuracy check, but you swing in a circle based on your character. And if there's no one's within that circle, you've just wasted the attack. But if you know guys rushed you after they blinded you with that gas grenade, hit this Lotus Drops move, and you'll do AoE circle and damage those fuckers without even seeing them. Which is kind of nice. And it also softens them up for the minus defense, which you'll appreciate too. But aim, again, that increased perception is nice. The downside of this is because of the lame 20 level 20 recipe, plus 5, of course. The recharge on this is piss. 10-second duration, and you have to wait another 41 seconds before it comes back. That's a bummer. Shinobi, at the very least, though, like I said, gives you that solid hit buff the entire time. Now, having said that, I could have taken this increased perception and put it up in here but then I wouldn't have this chance of build-up proc. And again, the reason that you would do this was because that would give you the increased perception all the time. That's awesome. But then you would have this chance of build-up proc. So it's kind of on you. If I was PvPing, I probably would take this here and put it up in there. But the reason I did this set, for those of you wondering why I did this 1-2 combo, because it is kind of lame, is really the set bonus. The smashing lethal defense, 1.88%. That's what got me to my cap. See that? 45.01. Just barely at the soft cap. Combat jumping, a staple for my builds. Kismet proc and the shield wall proc, so 5% resistance to everything, plus 6 to hit bonus, so as long as that's running. And even this is kind of wasted with this, now that I think about it. I don't really need that. Yes, it's more on top and it's more likely that I'll hit shit, so it's not that it's wasteful. I really could have put another shield wall proc, or shield wall recipe over here as a level 50. Got maybe a little more defense out of it, maybe some endurance discount, but I'm doing great for endurance, so I really didn't care. The only other bonus then would have been the 2 set slotted for this shield wall would have been a 10% regen buff, which again, I don't really need, but I could have done it. Lotus drops, this is the one downside. I didn't get a chance to slot this heavily. There are 30 plus 5s, but this is the eradication set. You always want to 3 slot those minimum, in my opinion. Notice it went for accuracy all the way. Actually recharge, actually damage recharge, and actually damage endurance recharge. The only 3 that are in this set, you grabbed all 3. If I had a 4th one here to put, which I don't, if I had another slot, I would honestly grab the proc, the chance of energy damage. Because it doesn't hit that often. The recharge on it's kind of slow. But that means that proc is more likely than not going to go off. So that's why. And that would have been nice extra little gravy on top. And it would have thematically fit with a Magus build because, again, with their weapons, they usually charge their weapons with spells. So you do, like, Shocking Grasp through your sword. And that kind of would have felt like that. But, whatever. But the reason you 3-slot this, minimum, in my opinion, is not only the max endurance, but also that massive defense buff for energy negative. And look at that, energy negative. I'm at the soft cap and beyond for energy, and that extra 3% is adding to this here, which is why I'm at 37.9 for negative. It's not perfect, but it's getting there, and I appreciate that. And again, just the tiniest purple shield bonus for defense that you can eat for one of your Skittles. We'll put this well beyond the soft cap, and put this one beyond the soft cap, and it'll put these guys really close to the soft cap. It'll put it to 30, just about 40, about 37, give or take. These ones though would still be the ones that straight up suck. Psi, fire, and cold. Yeah, but that's always a thing. But just to show you this one again, first the power, just because you already know what combat jumping and aim does. But what the power for this one does is that minus defense. And again, softens everybody up. Big hog and circle of damage. It's just really bad damage, in my opinion. Blaze. This one is solid damage, on the other hand. This one's fucking money. And you'll notice that this one got the chance of fire damage proc. That's why this one got the proc. Because I'm going to want to use Blaze as often as possible. Because this is my heaviest DPS attack single target that I have. Of course you're going to use it all the time. Which is why you want the chance of fire damage proc in there, in my opinion. So that you can continue to see that 107 spike on those son of a bitches. That's really, really sweet. And it's solid accuracy, solid damage, solid recharge. It's a solid hit. It's cheap enough that I can cast it now and not really feel that bad about it. Really good accuracy, and when I get all my buffs and everything besides, it really hits like a brick shit house. Very fast casting time. Another reason why it does so much DPS is because it's so fast to cast it. And again, you will appreciate that little bastard. Notice that it also sets them on fire, so it ticks for damage. Kinjiinto, again, slotted my steadfast protection, 3% defense, plus some extra resistance. That's why it's 30 plus 5. Otherwise, you could attune it. Don't attune this one. I have 50 plus 5 for heal, 50 plus 5 for endurance mod. That's because these things really do buff both regen and recovery a lot. Now, yes, I could have grabbed, say, a Numina. I could have grabbed, say, a performance shifter. But why? When I'm getting amazing buffs just from one slotting it for each of those things at 50 plus 5. To me, that was definitely worth. And I still got my Numina down here. I still got my performance shifter down there. Now, I could put another performance shifter up there, though. Because this is not a unique one. This is unique. The regen recovery and the miracle recovery buff. And again, I honestly don't really need those, because if you really shut that off, these are still amazing numbers. This is not leaps and bounds better. So honestly, if I really needed to recover a slot, this would probably be the place to take it. I'd maybe make this the Miracle proc or the Numina proc, one or the other. take this slot away and put it somewhere else. But again, where to put it? I don't know. There's a couple places that I could think. Here, maybe even Mystic Flight just to round this one off to get the AoE up a little bit more. But again, I can't say it was an amazing choice to lose another thing here. But that heal and endurance, that really does add a lot. Because again, if you shut that little bastard off, you drop back to realistic numbers. But having it like this and having high defenses like I do, when I take an alpha strike and it hurts, I can regen from it pretty goddamn good, as long as that thing's up and running like it should. That doesn't mean I don't need a Skittle, because remember, bad luck happens. You're relying with defenses builds like this, with crap resistances, you're relying on RNGs to save your ass. So when you take just a bad roll where they hit you 10 times in a fucking roll from like 10 different guys, your health goes down, dead. Do not rely on regen and high defenses to save your ass. What you need is ability to self-heal, which I do not have, like a clickable power, or in my case, a Skittle. So I use Skittles to heal myself. And if I really take a lot of hits, I will pop Rune of Protection. Just because it will increase my resistances to a decent enough level that the next hit that might come through might not kill me. Mystic Flight, again, for its teleportation ability. Alone, you want to have some distance on that thing and endurance discount, so I do appreciate that. But it is a power pig. You're not going to run it, like I said, in combat unless you have no choice, or if someone's buffing you in some way. Because even when you run that, we're still doing fine. But it's still one of those where I'd probably not want to fly around everywhere with Mystic Flight on. But I did get myself some KB protection, which I do appreciate. And again, if you do view totals, your status protection, you notice that my KB protection is only 4. That's where the 4 is coming from. So if I didn't have this proc in here, I'd be flip-flopping on the ground every fucking time. Now, of course, when I do this, I'm amazing. When I do Clarion, I'm even more amazing. So again, I have protections when stuff like that happens. But I do appreciate having at least one bit of KB protection always on me. Because if you ever fight those Circle of Thorn wizard bastards, you know the one I'm talking about, they're called the Rune Mages or whatever. They'll do this massive jump up in the air and slam on the ground, and it's a big earthquake on the fucking ground that pulses and pulses and pulses, and it knocks everyone flippy-floppy like fish on your ass and back up, on your ass, back up, and it's annoying to fight them in that AoE, and it takes forever for that AoE to wear off. But if you have just this 4 KB protection, you will not fall down. You will be able to stand there toe-to-toe with those bastards and kill them. That's more helpful than you think. Of course, the immobilized protection is coming from combat jumping, just to point that out to you here. And of course, our figures coming from our Kujiento. There it is. So again, we have a few protections, but not much. Arcane Bolt. Again, okay damage for most people. Crap for me right now. It's looking better because of things like this. So again, realistically, it's not huge damage. But I went for the Kinetic Crash, 50 plus 5s for accuracy, damage knockback, damage knockback. Why? Because slotting it this way, my accuracy is not amazing on it. As you can see, it's only 59.62, so it would be 1.59. But remember, with my extra accuracy bonuses that I have globally, I'm well within the range of where I'd want to be. I have solid damage, it's in the green. I have really good KB. Remember, this is a chance of KB. And again, it's low KB to begin with, but we've modified it with this KB, and KB in here, which is why you're seeing that ED number, that 158.99. So that decent looking knockback of damn near 3 was probably really, really low. Probably more knocked down than anything. But I do appreciate that, because when it does proc, because it's a chance of, they will go flying back away from me. And again, as a blaster, I appreciate the distance. So another reason for wanting to do that. The other reason, though, was obviously to get the smashing lethal resistance. That's 2.25%, and you will appreciate that. Blazing Bolt, sniper set. Got myself the extreme measures one for the AoE and melee defense. Remember, I needed the extra little bit for smashing and lethal, and fire and cold can kind of suck it, but I definitely wanted the melee part, and that's the reason for that. But the recovery, the HP, the damage buff, yes please, all that stuff is gravy, and it's good damage, and it's good accuracy, and good recharge. The only real things to really give a damn about. It'd be nice to have the better endurance on this, but I can't say as I care. I do appreciate the extra range, though, because Jesus Christ, 220 feet away, I can shoot that motherfucker. And remember, this is the one that's the sniper upgrade with the blasters. So you can pause and take the long casting time and do epic damage, or in combat, it'll have a big circle around power, which means you can instant fire that, which means the damage goes down for the long versus the long pause. But because it's such a fast cast time, the DPS goes up because you're just boom, sniper, just right in the face, and that's amazing. And again, solid damage. Everyone wants Blazing Bolt. Kick, nothing really to say about it. I needed to grab Tough and Weave. Tough, slotted it for reactive armor, 40 plus 5. That's as high as you can slot them. Notice we have decent resistances, well within the red for Ed. Endurance discount, could use some loving, but I did my typical resistance, endurance, recharge. And again, why? So that when I have this thing on, my freaking smashing and lethal is a complete and utter piss. It's still not great, but again, we have really good smashing and lethal resist or defenses, so when something does sneak through, at least it's not going to hurt quite so much. It's much better when you do that, though. Inferno. Notice I did a full eradication set. Maybe not the best choice ever, but I'm happy with this because it gave me energy, negative defenses again, and I appreciate getting above the soft cap and getting this one closer to the cap. And then I have some AoE defenses, which again is the reason why AoE is not completely in the toilet, but again, it's not amazing. But I do appreciate that, and the extra end, the extra HP, the extra regen, that's all gravy on top. And it has a chance for energy damage proc. It's a decent enough spell. Got okay accuracy, and I don't need much accuracy for a nuke anyway, because they're always innately heavy hitting. Number 75% is the normal. This starts out at 105. So the fact that it gets 67.97% extra accuracy pushes this well above the chance that it's going to hit more often than not. Good solid damage that's in the red. Good recharge, so you can use it a lot because this does not crash your endurance like it used to. But it is not great on endurance discount. It's still a power piggy. Not a whole lot I can do about that. Weave, cytoskeleton exposures at 50 plus 2, 50 plus 2. Luck of the Gambler proc at 50 plus 5. Again, that gives me my nice red zone for defenses and a decent endurance discount thanks to these two guys here. That's a solid upgrade for defenses. As you see, you shut it off, you lose quite a bit. About 5.5 defense globally. And of course, I appreciate the extra recharge thanks to that proc. And remember, this is not attuned. Why? Because it does defense as well. That's why it's 50 plus 5. It's not amazing, but that 19.9% is what's helping me get into that red zone for defense. Because if it's not there, I'm looking at the 43. It's not, again, screwing me a huge amount. But again, I don't see the 45 anymore, brother mutant. Yeah, I know. That's why we do 50. Like this. Right click it and do the plus. And you see it changing the upper corner there. Click the power again. Now it's at 50 plus 5. And that's where I like to be. Knows my gold dragonfly. Cone. Minus defense, which is nice. So you hit more than one guy. You got a couple dudes at least that's been softened up for you and the team. Got a chance for knockback. A pretty good chance for knockdown, I should say. 60% chance to do that 0.67 knockdown. That's nice. That's a really nice screw you move, and I went straight for actually damage, endurance, and recharge, baby. Just everything all over. Full multi-strike set because this is a PBAOE set. And again, the reason for wanting this one is it gives me extra resistances across the board. So I got extra smashing lethal. I got extra fire and cold. I got extra energy neg. And I got defense for AoE and defense against melee. Again, something that I needed because melee defense means you get a small amount of smashing lethal defense as well. Puts me well within the range of where I want it to be. And again, it hits like a British sick house, and it's a solid accuracy attack as well. Scorpion Shield, just like we did Weave, so the cytoskeleton exposures twice. The Luck of the Gambler at the 50 plus 5. Remember, do not attune it. That's a solid buff to your smashing, lethal, and energy, and it's what gives me some of my toxic resist. See that? Can't augment that resistance, it's just innate and it's built in. But I do appreciate it. Web Envelope. I'll get a solid 50 plus 5 for all of these weird sets. So again, capitalizing on the action and the immobilize. That's all I really gave a shit about. If I could throw in some endurance or range in there or whatever it is I grabbed it. But by and large, you 4-slot the enfeebled operation set because at the 4th slot it gives you a smashing lethal defense 2.5%. That's a lot. That's really nice. That's why immobilizes are almost always in my build if I'm going to go for a smashing lethal defense build. You'll see me try to get at least 1 or 2 of those in there. If I honestly could have made this a 4-slot, I would have done this twice because these are not unique sets. I would have done 4 like this and the exact same 4 over here. I don't give a shit that this did not do damage or did low damage. I've been fine with it because, again, that extra 2.5% defense would have been money. and extra energy neg resistance besides. Well, I appreciate that, but again, it's not enough to give a shit about, really. So, Spiderlings went full in on the Expedient Reinforcement set. This is a recharge intensive set. So you'll notice that my recharge buff on this is very, very high. This isn't the only set I could have done. Not only could I have done the lesser version, the Call to Arms, it's a solid buff set too. I could have also have gone the purple set. This is actually the only one over here that's actually has some good recharge in it. The purple set. But again, I don't care about side defense. I mean, yes, I do care, but 5% is not going to make me amazing. The extra regen and health and all the other shit would have been nice, but the chance of buildup could have been useful because, again, this is 3 Spiderlings. If I understand that right, that chance of buildup, this thing right here, that procs for each of their attacks, and they don't have many attacks, but there's 3 of them. So if each of them has a chance for a buildup, for their own separate buildup to go off, then I could add to my DPS considerably, or their DPS, I should say, considerably. But I haven't tested that, so I didn't care. I wanted this one because it gives them a resistance bonus aura, and this means that any of my pets within a certain range of me, which includes these 3, obviously, will have a decent 10% resistance to everything. It's not amazing, but it will keep them alive just a tiny bit longer. And then, of course, that's fully slotted. And again, the reason for wanting this set, besides the resistance, was the fact that at tier 6, I get defense against ranged a decent amount. And that also equates to defense against energy and native energy, which again makes these numbers better. Rune of Protection, Gladiator's Armor, just a nice recharge resist, 1 at 50 plus 5. And then a level 46 or an attuned. It doesn't matter for this one. You can attune it if you want. Gladiator's Armor at level 46 is good enough. This is the global 3% defense to everything. Again, between this one and this one, you always want those in your builds if you can fit it in there, because that's 6% global defense. That's really hard to pass up, man. Just for 2 slots like that, totally worth it. That's the build, guys. This video is definitely long enough. The next one will be a lot shorter, in my opinion, because, again, we will not be wasting a lot of time in-game, and we won't be wasting time pointing out stuff, like why I have to do videos like this now. But my name is brothermutant. Please like, subscribe, comment down below. Tell me what you guys think. I'll see you guys soon. Bye now.